Welcome to Fundamentals for Startups, everyone. Welcome to Fundamentals for Startups, a CoMotion Labs production. My name is Caroline Hansen, and I am Startup Pulse Manager and your host today. If you've joined us before, you know that CoMotion Labs is a multi-industry incubator hosting early-stage startups for both inside and outside the UW community. We are committed to nurturing and enabling the success of our startups, contributing critical infrastructure and opportunities for learning, mentoring, and networking. We have 3 incubators on campus, life science and hardware in Fluke Hall across campus, and tech here at Startup Hall. If you are a founder looking for a community to help your startup grow, we'd love to talk to you. This event, Fundamentals for Startups, is a regular lecture series open to anyone interested in learning about entrepreneurship and building a startup. Every week, we bring experts with diverse perspectives and experiences to share insights, inspire action, and offer space for questions. All of the Fundamentals for Startups presentations are archived on our YouTube channel and the CoMotion website, where you can filter by topic. We go back about 5.5, 6 years, so there's a lot of information there. To learn about and register for future Fundamentals events, visit CoMotion Labs online and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Today, I'm excited to introduce Adam Kranicki, CoMotion's Digital Content and Database Innovation Manager. Adam has nearly 2 decades of experience coaching startups in search of financing. Today, he'll share strategies for sourcing capital from grants, loans, investments, accelerator programs, prize money from pitch competitions, and more. His talk will also touch on alternative methods, such as crowdfunding and using retirement funds, and other free resources to help startups reduce operational costs. So let's welcome Adam.
Thank you so much for having me. How many of you want money right now? Okay, you're at the right presentation. So today what we're going to do is we're going to have a blitz. And this is going to differ from a lot of the workshops and panel discussions. Is we're going to roll through material to try to provide a wide breadth of funding sources that you can explore. And so I'm going to ask that you hold your questions to the end. Otherwise, what we'll spend our time doing today is, hey, I have an energy startup and I'm looking for money for software for me and my team, and we'll each get into our individual conversations, right? I'm going to try to address your questions throughout, and I would ask you that afterward, if you have questions, please ask them. Also, feel free to approach me after the presentation, as well as I'm happy to talk with you offline, okay? So as they noted, I've had about 20 years of helping startups raise money. I've helped nonprofits also raise money. Government agencies go after federal government money. I've also been on the other side. I ran a microfund. I've also run a seed fund. Also did a grant fund for early stage entrepreneurs, and I helped build an accelerator program. I've also helped local investors build their due diligence methods to see what they should be evaluating and looking for. So there's a wide variety of things. And unlike a lot of other funders that would give a similar presentation, I've had to go across the entire spectrum, so I'm not here to pitch any one. And so typically I'm learning from you all about what works and what doesn't, and I can talk to those experiences based on my experiences with entrepreneurs and nonprofits I've helped. So what we're going to talk about today is, what do funders want? And overall, across all these funding sources, what they want they want to mitigate risk, they want to make money, and they want to meet other goals. Usually it's a social or technological or some type of preference type goal. And what they're going to do is they're going to have you submit for that money. But here's the key thing, is they want to fund you. They want to have a fund or a grant or something unless they wanted a good opportunity. What you're going to do is you're going to prove that you're the best opportunity for them. And to do that, you're going to mitigate your risk. Understand that investors and funders are just like us. They have limited time, they have limited funding, limited knowledge, and a limited network of people to ask. So they are focused on what they think would be a good deal. So today we're going to talk about how do you find funders, align with them, and prove that you have a viable funding opportunity. And the first step is to get organized. So with your team, you should be creating your wish list. If I were you, I'd go through every step of your customer process, basically your customer journey. And I would say, what do I need in order to advertise, to engage, to contract, to get them to pay, to do fulfillment of a product, and to provide customer success? I'd be going the whole way through that with my team. And then I would use that to prioritize. What must I have in order to raise money? And what must I have to meet the funder's goals? You can put your laundry list together. Unfortunately, some funders won't fund the thing that you really want to do, but you have to align with the funder. This is a good place to start. The next thing you're going to do is mitigate risk up front. It's too late if you talk to a funding source and you haven't taken these steps to mitigate risk for them. They won't think that you're serious. Sometimes really, really nice investors will take you under their wing and talk to you and tell you what you need to do like this. But what you want to do is go in and make one heck of an impression. You want to have the conversation with the banker, the investor, the accelerator program lead that says, hey, I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going. I've already taken these steps. And that way, the next conversation becomes, how can I get your money? So the first thing you're going to do is assemble a great team. And what that means is you're going to have your co-founders, you're going to have your employees, your independent contractors, advisory board, and your mentors. What's nice about startups is there's any number of government agencies and university departments, as well as local nonprofits that provide mentorship and advisors and other types of free resources. And so if you go to the SBDC, Small Business Development Center, if you go to CoMotion, we can help you. And then there's also local mentor networks in our area that you can work with to get free advice. You can turn those people into your advisory board. And what that does is it helps you establish credibility. These people are saying that I am a viable opportunity. You should be looking at me. They might go on your website. They'll go into your pitch deck. It shows that you are working with really good, credible people. It also does something else. It gives you the advice and access to their networks. And you don't have to go and look up everything yourself. You don't have to email everyone yourself. You don't have to, basically put the time into doing all the work yourself. You're building an army of different good people. And so what I encourage you to go to networking events and go to local industry events to find people to be co-founders, to work with, to hire them as independent contractors, and to be advisors. There's a couple of resources on this slide that I'll point to, and we're not going to cover them today, which is there's certain resources I've posted the links to for how to basically divide equity for co-founders. And then there's also one that if you have an advisor that's really serious about advising your company, there's a founder-advisor standard template agreement that you can use to figure out how you could provide advisors with equity. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to get in compliance. There's nothing worse than you have 2 weeks to submit for a fund because you just found out about the accelerator deadline or the grant fund deadline, and then you're trying to scramble to get all your documents together. And what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that you've taken the steps with your attorney to file. And how many of here have heard of an 83B election related to securities? Good. Good attorneys. Thank you. For you, those of you that haven't, look into it. A lot of people fail to file. These are the types of things that investors are going to look for. The other things that they're going to look for are, you can see in the Series A due diligence checklist, and there's a number of them online. There's an SBIR pre-submission checklist that gives you an idea of what grant funders are looking for, and there's also bank lending checklists. And these are ubiquitous across the internet. The next thing you're going to do, and this is the hardest thing that startups have to do, prove customer demand. There's a big difference in the world between saying I have customers, having users, having people that might pay me money, and then having actual buyers. And then beyond that, having enough buyers where you don't have to advertise to them to get them. They come and find you. So the way to do this is you can do customer discovery. And customer discovery is sitting down and doing an interview with one-on-one with somebody to talk to them about their pain. Talk to your customer about it. See the words that they use, see how they talk about the pain, the size of the pain. They'll even talk about your competitors and talk about contracts you never even knew about. They'll give you that information. You don't get this information from a survey. And the reason why is that surveys only give the answers to the questions that you ask. Customer discovery teaches you about things you didn't even know about. So that's where I would start. And there's any number of other workshops and online courses, and especially through CoMotion, that we provide for customer discovery. The next thing you want is paying customers. Like I said, users are different than paying customers. If you can show an investor or funding source that you have people paying you money and it's recurring and they're coming back to you, that makes a really strong argument for getting money. And then beyond that, once you have product market fit, it feels amazing. You don't see it necessarily in your data, but you feel product market fit. And the way you feel it is, hey, I didn't talk to so-and-so or this company, and they signed up. Did we advertise to them? Did we make a sales call? Did we send an email? No. They're coming after you. And once you have that pool, that's an awesome place to be. That's product market fit. That's starting to have some traction. The next thing that you need to do is prove that your market size is sufficient. Now, with grant funders and other folks, they want to know that the problem you solve is big for a number of people. So when I talk about markets for more social mission-oriented funding sources, it means that you're going to solve a big problem for society. Funders for grants don't want to solve a problem for 12 people. There's entire groups of pharmaceutical drugs that never get funding because only a few people have it, unfortunately, and they've had to create government funds to fix that. But they want to see a big market. So for investors, what they want to see is a market that would support a 10x return on their investment. And so typically, a safe place to be is hundreds of millions or billions in dollars in revenue. The other thing you need to do is demonstrate how you'll capture this market. This is really difficult because for certain types of products that are enterprise software or large infrastructure projects, your sales timelines could be 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. And showing how you're going to capture that and then stay in business until you start locking in those deals is tough. So you have to show that you can capture that market, and the best way to do that is to have done it, whether it's in another job or through the other customers that you already have. The next thing you want to prove is prove that you can make a product. As an entrepreneur, you're always using what you have to pitch for the next big thing. So if you understand where you are, you pitch for the next thing that you need to do. So let's say you have an idea. Well, what you need next is a proof of concept. You write it down, you say, this is generally how it would work, this is how we know it would work. The next thing you do is you actually build a prototype and or prototype. Prototype is the functional version of what you're doing to prove that the device will work or the software will work. A prototype, how many people have heard that term? It's relatively new. The Right It is a book by Albert Savoya that talks about building your prototype, which is something that helps you evaluate your market. So this might be something that is a piece of software or appears to be on the face of everything, but it's really a person in the machine sending back answers. Or it might be something like you think there's an idea of a little robot that delivers toothbrushes to hotel rooms. And it turns out it's not programmed by itself. It's not even navigating by itself. It's a person driving the robot, just to prove that people like this thing and they would use it and pay for it. The next step above that is the minimum viable product. There's a book called The Lean Startup that goes into this in detail, and there's any number of government agencies, private nonprofits that use this model. to talk about what your first product should be, and it's the minimum viable version of a complete product that you would provide to your consumers. And I love this quote by Reid Hoffman, that's if you're not embarrassed by your first product, you shit too late. So what you need to do is make your minimum viable product, complete, but instead of trying to build a car, for example, you're trying to build a bicycle or even the unicycle version, right? So get something out there and then iterate on that. And then the next step above that is a commercial product. And that's what you're probably, most of us in the room are probably trying to raise money for building the thing that we want to build, right? The next thing that you need to prove is your competitive advantage. The word I love saying is moat. It provides a nice picture. A moat is basically the barrier around a castle that prevents invading forces. You're going to have to answer this question for any investors. Basically, why you? How are you going to keep other folks out? Some ideas are you're going to provide a higher quality or more convenient experience, lower price, which I really wouldn't want to compete on because then it's a race to the bottom. Faster delivery, intellectual property. One that's come up in the last couple of years that's especially useful is having data and insights related to that proprietary data that others do not have. And then the other ones are, do you already have contracts with marquee customers? Think about what a contract with Microsoft or Amazon would do for your startup. How much credibility would that provide? And when you talk about first mover advantage, first to market's not a gigantic advantage, but having first to the marquee customers to work with you, that's a gigantic advantage compared to other folks. The other one that you can use to your advantage is if there's difficult to overcome regulation, and you're the first one to do it, you can unlock the market. So I knew a guy when I was back in Central Oregon that had figured out a way to do payment processing for cannabis companies using credit cards. They have not released how they did that. It's not patented anywhere, but they are making money. It turned a cash-based business into a more convenient business, and there's an advantage to that. And they overcame that regulation, and they spent about $100,000 with attorneys to figure that out. The other thing that you want is traction and stickiness, scalability, and network effects. So if you have customers that are coming to you regularly and they keep coming back, that's stickiness. A lot of you might get people signed up, but they're never coming back. They might download the app. What you want is to get them coming back and to show that data. You want to show that when they do come back, you can continue to serve other customers in a very scalable, cost-effective way. And then for network effects, if you can show network effects, you can raise money because you're showing that those people can talk to other folks, and they're growing your business for you. That's a really strong place to be. The other thing that you're going to do is prove your distribution model. This will overlap with a couple of previous points. You show how you acquire customers, how you generate revenue and hopefully profit, how you get the product to customers in a scalable way, and then how do you create a positive feedback loop where when you're getting it to a customer, they're telling somebody else about it, or you're sending a message just out to people that they refer, and then getting the next cohort in. One thing that I've been asked in the past is it better to have hypothetical examples, comparable examples from other businesses, or have customers and revenue? It's always customers and revenue. If you can show money and that you're making money, you can defeat anyone's questions about, well, I don't think this is a viable business. Airbnb was a great example. They had 1 million people stay in Airbnbs before they got investment. And, if people are like, well, nobody would stay in an Airbnb. Who's going to stay in someone else's home? That seems like a weird concept 15 years ago, but now we do it, right? And so they overcame that objection by saying people are already doing it. Really easy to address an investor's questions with proof. The other one you need to have is prove that you have healthy financials. Please be tracking your financials, have your financial documents at the ready, hire a bookkeeper at the very least, if not an accountant, and please pay your taxes. Nothing kills a funding deal like having some type of lien or tax fine on your company. And again, you can look at the due diligence checklist and the bank loan checklist to see what type of things they're looking at regarding financials. So after you start to look at these individual issues, you're going to go back to your pitch. And your pitch and your other documentation should convey that you've built a business that can achieve these goals. You've built a machine that can make money. You might not be making money, but you built a machine that can. It provides the credibility that you need, and it's a good jumping off point. And while you probably could raise money somehow, some way, and people do it, it doesn't mean you can't get money. Somebody might have a rich family member that gives them $80,000 and they have none of this. I've seen that. There's not even a viable business idea. It's just a general, I want to sell this product. And somebody in the family goes, I'm an investor. Some people get lucky like that. Most of us have to prove things, and to get the money that you want, because you're good entrepreneurs, and you want smart money at a good rate and a good deal that works for you. That doesn't just give you money, that they help you find the network, the customers, and other things that you need. So this section is about funding sources. We're going to provide the very basics today, and it's going to be broad. Like I said, I've worked across any number of these things. There are people in this world that know more than me on any individual one of these, and I'm happy to say that. However, as somebody that's worked alongside many entrepreneurs and nonprofits, this overview can expand what you might do with your business as you grow. And it might not be relevant to you today to go after whether it's grants or bank loans or whatever it might be. It probably will be useful as you grow your business and you hire employees. So the first one we'll cover is grants. So grants are money given by government agencies, private foundations, and corporations to achieve some type of societal goal under a grant contract. So they contract with you and they say, we want to meet some societal goal, and you say, sure. And the societal goal could be address homelessness, address food security. It might be decrease cost of energy. It might be things like address climate issues. It might be things like the Department of Defense is a major grant funder. Major grant funder. National security. These societal goals are the reason they're providing funding. So if you're providing an app that's a game like Angry Birds, how do you link that to the societal goal? It's tough. You probably can't do it. So grants might not be the best fit for you. But if you can link what you're doing to something bigger in society, look into grants as an option. A couple of grants that I will mention are basic and applied research grants, small business innovation grants, and then corporate grants. And lastly, we'll talk about some workforce grants. So for basic and applied research grants, what they fund are exploration of an idea or concept that could potentially benefit society in some way. Sometimes they're funding things like exploring new materials, exploring the way certain type of chemistry works, exploring the way the universe works. Basic research is the earliest stage. And then there's applied research grants, which are taking that early research and starting to apply it and turn it into technology. And what I've seen with basic and applied research grants, and especially the last 10 years, 13 years, ever since the sequester in 2010, the federal government is now requiring these grants to align more with practical use cases. So it's advantageous for entrepreneurs because while you might not be eligible under the terms of the grant to go after it, if you find a grant that's somewhat relevant and you can work with a research institution, potentially a faculty member, to go and submit it, you might be able to get some work done on something that you're unsure about. It's tough to do that. I've seen people chase basic and applied research grants from a startup for years. And what I can say is, unless you find that faculty member that's aligned with what you're doing, it's probably not going to be a fit. It's probably not going to go and work out. Faculty and innovators at research institutions, they have their own research they're trying to pursue. So you have to be very careful about people's time and whether or not they're going to commit to your project. And so if you're lucky, you might be able to find somebody like that, but a better fit for most of you will be small business innovation research grants. And so SBIR grants, as they're known, and STTRs, they are meant to help you develop technology. And they are from $50,000 to $250,000 in the first phase one. I've seen ones that go up to $1 million for phase 3. And what you do is you would submit that from your business to the federal government, and what you would do is prove that you can accomplish what they want under that grant. So like the Department of Defense we talked about, they put out a solicitation every April or June, somewhere in that timeline. And we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to fund things that would benefit national security or benefit the warfighter. And as a private company, you would submit that grant, get that money in, develop under it, and the best part about it is it's non-dilutive, which means it's not an investment, it's not a loan, it's a grant. That's money you get to use to prove your concept. That's rare. Another source is corporate grant programs for small businesses. I've lumped this together with the private foundation ones. There are a number of private corporation grants that usually go to underrepresented entrepreneurs or small businesses or folks that are developing technology relevant to that business. What I would say is to look up corporate grant programs for small business. I would say look at the companies that, if you're doing technology, look at the companies that are in that technology space or that industry field, and then see if they have a program for startups or a grant program. If you're doing things that's more like a more traditional small business, there's any number of these. You just have to look up small grants for businesses from banks. Wells Fargo has one, Venmo has one, any number of the ones listed on here have one, and you just have to look through those criteria. The amounts for those are usually less than $25,000 for the corporate grants. The other one is you scale. So if you have employees, anybody have employees yet that are getting paid? Okay. So for workforce development grants, training's expensive. You can get incumbent worker training grants from the federal and from state governments, and there's a link to one of them on here. The other thing you could get money for is some states, including Washington, have funds to preserve and retain workforce. So if you're running into funding issues that are up and down and you don't qualify for another line of capital, then you can go after that grant to kind of smooth out the payment each month and make sure that you can keep people employed. These grants, like I said, there's a number of grants that serve underrepresented entrepreneurs. There are veteran-owned business grants, minority-owned business grants, and women-owned business grants. You can look through any one of these services. Typically, there are government programs that are meant to help you if you qualify for any of these areas. So VBOC, the Veterans Business Outreach Center, you can reach out to them. You can also reach out to the MDEA, or MBDA, which is Minority Business Development Center. And then there's the women-owned business. They also can qualify for MBDA, as well as there's usually a women's business center in every state that you're in. And so I'd encourage you to reach out to them. Why? You're building your team. You're getting advice. They might know about a lot more than what's on this list. And you're building your army of people that are going to reach out and help you win. A couple of grant resources for UW innovators. If you are faculty, staff, student, I'd encourage you to look at the Innovation Gap Fund, Postdoctoral entrepreneurship program, that one's super interesting because they'll fund a postdoctoral professional for a year to work on a company, the UW Royalty Research Fund, and then we also have an NSF I-Corps program, which pays to help you do customer discovery. And so there's a lot of resources internally. The other things that are internal are pitches and competitions, and we'll talk about that in a second. I'll just address a couple of key points on this grant finding platform slide. My favorite that I work on and I use is Grant Forward. I go and look up funding sources online, and I have it send notifications to me about new funding every single month. And so I'm trying to create a mechanism by which I don't have to do work to find out about new funding sources. And it has all the different types that I mentioned here. There's also a list of UW funding opportunities and grant guides that you can look at. One thing I will mention is for these grant databases from ProPublica, Grant Select, GuideStar, and Foundation Directory, or Candid as it's more recently known, I use those sources to look at nonprofit 990s and see where people are getting their money from, because that's all public information that's filed every year with the IRS. And so if I'm looking for something that has a social mission, and I'm wondering where funding might come from, or where even investors are, because sometimes people will donate that would also be an investor, you can see that information about who gave and where they gave and how much. The next thing that we're going to talk about as a funding source is pitch or innovation competitions. Typically, these are $1,000 to $25,000, and they're awards. So most of them in the smaller range don't require any equity or any type of grant or contract document. It's basically they give you the money. Sometimes these will go up to $1 million if equity is exchanged. And so you have to look at what type of competition you're doing, and you have to look at the amount of money you're getting versus the what you have to give up. So one of my favorites is the Bend Venture Conference. I've more recently worked for Oregon State University in Bend, Oregon, and the early stage was $25,000 for a minimal amount of equity, and it's good to help you unlock the next stage of your company, because competitions also provide credibility when you win. They also provide access to potential funders. So what happens is if you go to the competition and you win, people notice you. You get to put on your webpage that you're the competition winner, which provides credibility. People that represent the competition or the organization that runs it start talking about you. They introduce you to other people. You start building momentum for fundraising. You can use that to go after the next funding round. For competitions, sometimes people win the competition and don't accept the money if it comes with conditions, but they still get to say they're a competition winner. And from a team aspect, the importance of competitions can't be understated. So if you want to get your team on the same page about what your fundraising strategy is, and you want to make your pitch and give yourself a timeline to give your pitch and your pitch prep documents and everything else, join a pitch or innovation competition, because it gives you a deadline. Otherwise, you just kind of let it drift. Well, we'll get to it. This helps you get there. One thing I'll note on the last slide, I'll go back real quick. If you want to find pitch or innovation competitions, F6S is a place to look for search for funding competitions. And the UW Foster Entrepreneurship Competitions page has a number of competitions that are held here at UW. And so you can look at both of those. Here's another one that people typically don't think of as funding, but a lot of companies get free stuff. If you take your funding list, the things that your wish list, the things that you wish you had, and you said, how might I get that in some other way? And you can reach out to other folks about it. You can get people to donate equipment, unused items. Sometimes you can get people to let you have space for a period of time. Free stuff is a great way to not have to pay for things. That seems like a very common sense thing, but we forget it. We think that everything has to be a transaction. And if you're early stage, especially if you're a student, people like giving you free stuff. Another thing that you should look into from that funding list that you're creating, that wish list, is if there's costs. And you're like, I have to buy this software or this tool, or I have to join this network, or I have to join this industry association. Look if there's a discount or something that's provided for free. So for example, Amazon Web Services, it was more recently named the AWS Activate program. I think it's AWS Startup Program now. They provide free credits for servers. Microsoft Azure has free credits. HubSpot has free credits for the marketing and sales CRM that they provide. Usually it's a year that you can get this stuff. And you don't have to pay for it until the following year, right? And they're trying to get you hooked early. Why? Because as you grow, you will continue to use them. You're building your expertise around it. You're hiring employees around that. They're hoping to get you hooked early. Take advantage of free stuff. Now let's talk about the one that you probably are really wanting to talk about. So equity investment as a funding source. So equity investment is funding provided by investors, such as angel funders, venture capitalists, and others, in exchange for some ownership percentage of your company, whether through shares or membership units, under a shareholder agreement or some other type of option agreement. And for this, you have to prove that you've mitigated the risk. And there's any number of funding sources. I used to have a slide deck that had as many of these as I could potentially list. There's too many now. And they also come online and offline very quickly. So I'm going to point you to a couple of resources where you might find it. Here in Seattle, what we have is My Startup 365, which is from the State Department of Commerce. They have a list of angel investors and venture capital firms that are local. And the other ones, if you're doing life science, Washington Research Foundation has a fund. And the rest of these are things that are general that I've used. For example, Gust. Gust is a service that you can list your startup on, and you basically provide your executive summary, your pitch deck, and investors can search and view. At the same time, I've known lots of pitch competitions to use it as their application portal. And so what you can use it for is then apply for competitions. You also can use it to send that link to investors so they can view everything. It's like a centralized repo of where you might store your main funding documents when you're fundraising. The rest of these are places you can search. I'd encourage you to look at them. One thing I will note on this slide, there's equity crowdfunding. So we're kind of familiar with crowdfunding in this room through Kickstarter or microfunders. We'll cover that a little bit later. But imagine asking the crowd to invest in your startup. There's new tools to do that. There was regulation introduced in about 2012 or so that allowed people to do that. You can invest small amounts of your money into startups, and you can go on sites like Start Engine to do that. The key to remember about doing a campaign like that is that it is a campaign. It's a marketing campaign. So while it might provide a method for you to get money from the crowd to support your startup, you will spend a significant amount of money on marketing and advertising. That's the cost of admission. I knew a company that also raised over $1 million on that site. And before they closed the deal, because their funding documents had changed, they got kicked off. So they put all that time and money into marketing, and that deal was killed. All those investments were gone. So there's a risk, right? Their risk tolerance is low. Another place to look, and I love doing this is when I don't call this a hobby. It's not a hobby, but it's kind of fun to do. If you go into Product Hunt and you look up exactly what type of funding list that you want. Accelerators for energy companies. You can usually pull something up that's a Google sheet that has what you're looking for. Somebody's trying to provide it. So where do you get equity investment otherwise, other than angel investors and venture capitalists? There's accelerators, startup studios, and incubators. The amount of money that you get from each one of them differs. Usually accelerators are $10,000 to $120,000 in exchange for 3 to 10%. Startup studios are higher. Basically, a startup studio will provide space, mentorship, C-level executive. They provide a little bit more support. And then incubators typically don't provide money directly. They'll provide you connections to funding and or space and mentorship. That's how those differ. Locally, we have some great accelerators, and we'll start off by talking about Techstars. Techstars is local, but they also have accelerators across the country. And what I would encourage you to do for any of these, go to an accelerator that is focused on your industry and provides money. So there are people that have insurance accelerators. There used to be one out of Cincinnati that was focused on marketing SaaS technology. There's other ones that are just focused on things like the hospitality industry. Look for accelerators that are focused on your industry, because not only will they provide you the general coaching that you need and the introduction to the investors that will invest in those types of things, they also provide you with lists of potential customers, and they might actually be a customer. So did you know that Target has an accelerator? Yeah, consumer products. Why would they do that? Well, they're looking for things to put in their store. If you exit the accelerator, they might introduce you to investors, but they also might just acquire your company. They might be the strategic investor, and you could go into the accelerator and flip it. I just had somebody go through their accelerator, and they grew. They didn't flip the company, not yet. So the other things that you can look at is there's a number of lists online for accelerators. I've put a couple in here. One thing that I really like is Y Combinator has a startup school that's online with a number of videos. So as you start to get into accelerator topics and try to learn things about accelerators, you can watch videos. They're free. Our Fundamentals for Startup courses and workshops also provide a series of videos that might be relevant. But you can get the material nowadays. A lot of people are putting out this content to educate about how to get into these accelerators. So debt and loan guarantees is a funding source. Most of us are familiar with debt. Banks, lending institutions like CDFIs provide money under a contract in exchange for repayment of the principal and interest. And to get loans and any other type of debt-based financing, they're really looking at these 5 C's that are at the bottom of this slide. Character, which is your credit history, your capacity to repay, your capital on hand, so how much money are you contributing, collateral, so what property can be forfeited in case you don't repay the loan, and then the conditions are based on the risk profile that you have there. So if you have assets that you're trying to fund, like real estate, fleet-based vehicles, equipment for a restaurant, things like that, you can usually get debt and loans. Operational costs are more difficult. And while you might be able to get them through a few funding sources, most of them won't fund just that. They want to fund the thing that they can then take as collateral. And they're going to try to reduce their risk as much as possible. That all said, there's also loan guarantees. So you can find loans and get loan guarantees. So SBA has a program that through their loan guarantees that basically says if you don't pay, they'll pay a certain percentage of that debt. So what happens is the funder, the bank that provides that loan, will reduce your rate or provide you a longer timeline. I've seen people take commercial loans that would be only limited to 10 years and get 20-year terms on the same amount because of things that the SBA does. One thing that you might use this for is, let's say you're setting up shop in a lot of different locations. Let's say you have software that manages fleet vehicles or plumbing services, electrical services, and you're providing software to folks. You might franchise what you're doing and then set up those individual sites yourself and then use loans to buy the real estate, the vehicles, the other support costs. And so it's like the way McDonald's was made and really grown, right? McDonald's doesn't just make money on hamburgers. If they were trying to make money on hamburgers, it'd be a few cents per hamburger. They would have never grown. What they did was they separated the hamburger business from the real estate business. And they require the franchisee to go and pay the franchise fees, and then they use the loans and things to grow the real estate. And they hold the real estate and they sell it off eventually, and they make money too. So there's ways to grow using this. If you're early stage and you're looking for something that might not be a bank, two things that I would recommend is looking at a micro lender or a CDFI. And these are usually, what to think about is that they're small lenders that provide debt-based financing. And Kiva.org provides like crowdfunding version of that. And their loans are usually up to about $50,000. So sales is also a funding source. This is what Kickstarter is. You can fund your company via a Kickstarter where you pre-sell the product that you're going to sell. That's how a lot of them are funded. And the other way to do it is to sell an alternative product or service. And most people would know that as bootstrapping. And what you would do is you would sell consulting services or a different product in order to fund the main part of your business. Most average Kickstarters that succeed are about $10,000. In the past, it was about 72% of those successful ones had a video. So you have to invest the cost of producing a video. And then a rule of thumb that I've heard and actually seen in practice is you can raise about 3 times what you put into the marketing campaign. So I knew a guy that would regularly fund new product launches on Kickstarter, and for a $100,000 fundraise, he'd spend $30,000 on the marketing campaign. Nothing comes for free. And so you can fund things through sales and pre-sales, and that can help you grow. Building off of that, there's also revenue share or royalty financing, so invoice-based financing. So as you collect money, you can use the money that you're collecting to go and get some type of line of credit. A couple of the ones that I really like, this one was interesting about 2 or 3 years ago, called Pipe. They allowed you to take the revenue that you're generating through Stripe and to get a financial line of credit based on that. And so they would give you the money. Then they expanded to crypto, and some things happened as a result. And now they've broadened their portfolio, and it looks like they're financially healthy again. But the idea is that there are ways to get invoice-based financing, and there's one through the state, which is like a state royalty fund or revenue-based financing fund that you might want to look at. 2 other things. If you're going to sell around the world, especially for tangible products, there are state agencies, and the U.S. U.S. Department of Commerce has a program as well that will sponsor your export mission. So if you need to go sell honey in Japan, I had somebody do this. And the federal government basically paid for their trade mission. Go and establish and find a customer, get set up, and you can get money to go and produce exports and expand into new markets. So you might want to look into that. The other one that we'll talk about very briefly is individual retirement accounts and using the money from that. Yes, you can use your retirement to fund your business. But the way retirement funds work is they want you to lock it away until you're retired. And so the IRS has incentivized that. If you draw that money out, you're going to pay a penalty. If you do it wrong, without an accountant, you're going to pay a lot of money. So you can use them, But if you're going to use your retirement account and the money that you've saved through it to fund your startup or your company, please use an accountant. And the only link that I provided to that is to Davis Wright Tremaine's website and their blog, where they talk about all the things that could go wrong. They give you just an idea of what that might look like. So we're going to blitz through a couple of these last slides. Now we have some idea of what the funding sources are and what they do, who they're for. Let's talk about aligning with them. So what you can do is you can communicate early, but make sure you fit. Do some due diligence before you just, spray and pray that somebody's going to respond to you. Some people take that strategy. It usually doesn't work. Make sure you're aligned. The next thing you can do is use the correct medium of communication and follow-up. Don't contact investors on Facebook or Instagram on their personal one. The other thing is, you should put one person in the role of having the discussions and make it somebody's responsibility. That way there's some familiarity between the parties. And the other thing I'll say is, when you go into any investment conversation, is don't just show up and throw up. You're not there to do your pitch deck. You've probably already sent that. You've probably already, sent a summary of what you're doing. Have a conversation, address the questions that they have. If you show up and throw up, you're going to walk out of the conversation like, oh, I talked for 45 minutes. I hope it went okay. It didn't. If you walk out of there and you're answering their questions one by one, and their specific questions, then what happens is you'll probably get their advice, and you may even get their money. The other thing that you need to do is understand the funder's conditions. This takes so much time to do. Any one of these these funding resources, you could teach an entire class that lasts an entire semester just based on any of these funding sources. But you have to learn the language of what they're talking about, what they refer to things as, and so you're going to have to learn more. I wish that I can convey to you in 45 minutes everything that you need to do, but you're learning a whole new language here. The other thing that you need to do is redo your pitch and redo it often. Make sure that you're addressing what the funder wants. Think of them as your customer. And make sure that you have a version that's edited and online and saved between your teams so that it's easy to do that. Lastly, we're going to talk about doing a deal. A lot of this stuff should go without saying. If you get money from your rich family member, please get a contract in writing and have it reviewed. I can't tell you how many times I've had people that go to raise a Series A or an angel investment or accelerator funds, and it turns out that there was somebody that gave money but was never accounted for, whether it's a co-founder. Usually it's a co-founder too. Co-founder gives money, there's no contract, expects money back out. It was supposed to be a loan per our conversation, that one email that we sent back in 2016. Please get it in writing. You'll save yourselves a lot of time and money, and you really don't want to help pay for tap shoes for lawyers' kids. You're not creating a benefit fund for lawyers. Please don't. The next thing is you're going to get a review and use an attorney. When you use an attorney, they are there to support your conversation with the investor. I would usually say don't let a lawyer run negotiations for you. It gets expensive, but also their job as a lawyer is to mitigate risk completely. And there's no way to do that. You're going to have to take some risk. The other party's going to have to take some risk. Make sure everything's signed and then make sure it's followed. And then the next thing is you're going to track and report progress and maintain the relationship. Please follow up with your funders. Don't let them go away, because eventually you're going to have to prepare for the next round. And you're going to need that relationship. They're going to talk to the previous investor to see what you were like. They're going to talk to the grant funder, perhaps. They're going to see how it went. And you're going to have to do this multiple times. If you want to grow to $1 billion company, it might look like something like this. So for a university researcher, it would be something like there's research grants, SBIR grants, Founders, Friends, Family and Fools was the old term. Fools don't invest. Not the amount of money that you're looking for. Angel investors, venture capital, and then you can do private equity and IPO and merger. But you have to keep rolling this momentum forward. And to do that, you'll have to start at the beginning. So what did we start talking about? Figuring out what you want money for. The next step, mitigate your risk. Next step, figure out your funding source. Last step, do the deal. Get it in writing. That's why you do this. That's how you do it again and again and again, and you do it right. All right, well, thank you for your time today. Are there any questions?
What are some of the advantages, disadvantages of being in a place like CoMotion? Like, I imagine there might be a grant advantage with grants, or
So the services that we provide, the funding that we provide is amazing. And those individual services are great. And that's, from what my experience has been since I've been here, is they're well-tailored, well-considered, and there's actually money. It's not just vaporware that's out there, like some institutions will do that. The other thing that you get from working with CoMotion is, you're working with the University of Washington. And so that credibility also helps you as you go forward. So it's not just about the resources, it's also, and not just about the funding, it's also about having somebody in your corner that stands there alongside with you whenever you're trying to do, whether it's selling a product or raise money. Yep. Any disadvantages? We are a government institution, and sometimes we might not be able to move in the way that you want to move or at the speed that you do it. So depending on what you want to do, there's, you have to consider that it takes time. That's usually what happens. What other questions? Yes?
I know a question we get a lot in these types of presentations is, what if you're coming from a sort of subsistence level background, or you have some pretty deeply entrenched feeling of being broke, or like maybe you have student loans or some kind of like black mark on your credit score. Do you have any tips for moving through that and getting to the place where you can ask for money and evaluate? I
can empathize with that. As a person that ran a micro-lending fund, I saw this a lot. And I also learned through my career that the median age, average age of a successful entrepreneur keeps going up. A couple years ago, it was 42. Now reports are coming in that's 45. And the reason for that is that through your career, you build up money that you can then put into a business. So absent generational wealth, absent having a job that can support you in these things, it's really tough. What I would say is the early stage competitions and grants are really where it's at. That's where you go. That's where you focus your energy and your time. And then you use that to spin into getting investors. And it takes a lot more work, unfortunately, for those folks, because they don't have the money that pays for time. They have to use their time to raise the money. So it usually it can be done. It has been done. It just takes longer. The other thing too is I usually see awesome ideas out of those groups, and just because it's hard doesn't mean that they shouldn't do it. There's wonderful things that are built by people that come from subsistence backgrounds. Yeah.
Time for one more question in the room and then one online.
Thanks for your session. And within the context of meeting investors, engaging them, learning about their terms, pitching, how do you gauge fit between your startup and investor, and how do you tell who you can trust, who you can't trust, what might be predatory, and especially when it comes to groups of investors when ultimately we know we are seeking money and eventually might need the money?
Yeah, there's a lot there. And so whenever you're doing it, you're looking to build a relationship. Just like investors take referrals to funds, that's how they'll source a lot of them. You also should get referrals to funds from trusted mentors. Another thing that you can do is start learning the language now about what predatory looks like. And I would say spend a day just going through what types of bad stuff people have done for taking money, even post to Reddit even. about what you're doing. And there's probably dozens of things that you could look up about it. Learn that, and then the next thing is you need somebody in your corner, good attorney, good accountant, so that whenever those deals start being presented to you, you're like, I vetted this with my mentor, and he says it's probably not a great deal, but what do you think about these terms? And they'll let you know everything that's wrong with it. That said, to find good investors, the referrals can come from things like accelerators, incubators, your mentor network, and things like that. That's why I usually encourage people to go that route, is because those accelerators have worked with those people before. The lone investor scares me as well. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you all for joining us today. And from everyone at CoMotion Labs, which you are a part of, thank you for being here today. Next Friday at noon, Yoko Okano, co-founder of First Row Partners, will present Fundraising 101, Unlocking the Investor Perspective. Sign up today, and we will see you next week. Thanks.